This is a virtual meeting using the Zoom platform. Members of the public can view this meeting live on Channel 8 or the city's website. Live Spanish translation services are being provided for tonight's council meeting by telephone. Please dial 720-386-9023 and use code 104091. Pardon me for 1 second. 104091 star. If you're a council member, please be sure to have your video camera on and be mindful that we are streaming this meeting on Channel 8 and on our city's website. The chat function is disabled to ensure that the public can see all portions of the meeting. The city clerk is the host of the meeting, and I and our IT staff will be the co-host. Council members and panelists will be able to unmute themselves when recognized. Please mute yourself when you have finished speaking, and remember to lower your virtual hand to prevent disruptions. Members of the public who have registered to speak will be recognized at the proper time. As a reminder, we will use roll call votes only when required by law or when requested by a council member or the clerk. Other votes will be voice votes counted by raising hands in the Zoom app or as the chair determines. If a member disagrees with the stated outcome of the vote or feels that their vote was not properly heard or is not recognized, the member should immediately request the mayor's attention. This time I will call the meeting to order and ask the city clerk to call the roll.
Mayor Huseman.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Frank.
Present.
Councilmember Madera.
Present.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Present.
Councilmember Noble.
Present.
Councilmember Guardiola.
Present.
Councilmember Hurst.
Present.
Councilmember Grimes. Councilmember Smith.
Present.
Mayor Huseman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. At this time, I'm looking for a motion to excuse those members not present. Councilmember Alan Thomas.
So moved.
Councilmember Madera.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to excuse those members not present. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, we'll do a voice vote. Please give me a thumbs up in the chat window. And that'll pass unanimously. Great. Before we do the Pledge of Allegiance, we'd like to take a moment and have a moment of silence to recognize not only the police officer in Arvada who lost his life today, but also all first responders who have recently perished, both in and out of the line of duty recently. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to invite Councilmember Hurst to unmute your microphone, lead the council in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Hurst. All public comment will occur during citizen communication except for public hearings. Persons who registered to speak under multiple items will be allowed to speak multiple times. Is there anybody on council who wishes to make a motion to modify the public comment rules that were established? Seeing none, we'll move on to citizen communication. Per council policy, citizen communication is the time on our agenda for the public to address council on business and affairs of the city. The city council is not able to hear any comments at this time on land use matters that are before or may come before council. Please reserve such comments for the appropriate public hearing. As a reminder, we take your comments seriously, but do not generally respond to comments until later in the evening. Council must wait until administrative council business to take action in response to citizen communication. Council members can ask questions of speakers if desired. The city needed advanced registration in order to participate in citizen communication for this meeting. If you are currently in this meeting to speak during citizen communication, please listen for me to call your name and the clerk will unmute you so you may begin. If you do not respond or are disconnected, you may miss your chance to comment. Please give your name and address for the record and keep your comments limited to 3 minutes. If a council member wants to ask questions, please ask to be recognized when the speaker is finished. First on the list to speak this evening is Terry Lucero from 27J.
Terry, you should be able to unmute yourself and you'll have 3 minutes once you begin.
Good evening, Terry Lucero, 839 Canary Lane in Brighton. Are you able to hear me?
We can, yes, Terry.
Okay, thank you. I'm also the Chief Operating Officer for School District 27J. I believe Dr. Fiddler will be joining us also to comment. Just wanted to thank council and staff for their consideration of the requests before the Commerce City Council, specifically the dedication of the land that will be required, what we're calling ES 14 in the South Lawn of Reunion, and also the consideration of the release of funds that have been requested to assist in that construction. We appreciated the opportunity to work with staff, and we're looking forward to meeting the expectations of the community in the construction of that school. We're in design, and if all goes well, we'll be breaking ground in late August and be ready to open with phase 1 of that school, which will be about 350 kids, 325 to 350 kids. Likely be out for an election in November. If we were to be successful, we would just roll on and build a second phase of that school. But just wanted to take a minute, once again, thank the City Council for entertaining these conversations, and staff for shepherding through the process. And I know they're on the consent agenda, so I just, in advance of the consideration, just wanted to thank you. That concludes my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Lucero. Does anybody on council have any questions for Mr. Lucero? Seeing none, we thank you for your time this evening. We'll move on to Carrie Monty.
Carrie, you should be able to unmute yourself and you'll have 3 minutes once you begin.
I don't have any comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Monty. We'll move on to Dr. Fiddler.
Dr. Fiddler, you should be able to unmute yourself and you'll have 3 minutes once you begin.
Thank you, Dylan. Good evening, council. We apparently triple booked. We have Terry, Carrie, and myself all here tonight to thank you for your consideration of resolution 2021-50. As Terry mentioned, that is for the transfer of the school site on the South Lawn site there. I believe it's the cross streets there, or Udavon and East South Lawn Parkway. It'll be elementary 14, as Terry mentioned. We're very excited, grateful for the transfer of the property, as well as the disbursement of school fees to assist with that construction. And again, want to thank Mayor Huseman, the council, for their consideration tonight. As Terry mentioned, we do know what's on consent, but wanted to thank you for your efforts in hearing that tonight. Special thanks to Jason Rogers, Deputy City Manager, and to Steve Timms, Planning Manager, as I know that they've worked closely with our staff, Terry, Carrie, and others to get this to you all this evening. And we're just real grateful. We're excited to break ground sometime in August. And that concludes my comments.
Dr. Fiddler, does anyone on council have any questions for Dr. Fiddler? Councilmember Noble?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Fiddler, I was going to pull this from the consent agenda because I wanted it to be made crystal clear to the residents of Ward 4 and to Commerce City in general, just what we're talking about here. So you talk about phase 1 and that phase 2 will be tied to another bond issue in November. So could you clarify what people are going to be seeing with this elementary school in South Lawn and what the bond issue in November means for this school in South Lawn as well?
Absolutely great questions. So this elementary was not one of the promises we made in the 2015 bond. So it's actually a bonus project. So a combination of savings, premium, and interest on the 2015 bond program, the funds that you all are considering tonight. And then I think it's about a $3.5 million contribution from the Capital Facility Fee Foundation, which is a group of developers that contribute. I think we're right about $865 per single family home. So phase 1 will look just like Reunion Elementary, all of the core, if you will, like the main hallway, and then the single story portion of that building. So that will be phase 1, along with parking lot, playgrounds, and what have you. And then should we be out in November, which I anticipate I anticipate recommending that to our board in August for their consideration. Then we would build phase 2, and that would build the 2-story portion of that building. So think about 2/3 of Reunion, the main entryway there, lunchroom, cafeteria, gymnasium, that main hallway there, along with the offices. And then the 1st-story portion of that building is phase 1. And then phase 2 would be the 2-story portion of that building.
And would, at what point would students actually be in the building?
So our intention will be, as we said, to break ground in August. Whether the bond is successful in November or not, we intend to have kids in the building a year from this fall. Should the bond be successful in November, we'll just keep right on going and we'll build both phases at once and have the entire school. I think the capacity is right at 650 students. So we'll have kids in that building regardless in the fall of 22. Just depending how many students we'll be able to house there will depend on whether or not the bond is successful in November.
If the bond is unsuccessful, what does that mean for the school?
That means we'll stop there at phase 1 and we'll have to wait until some point in the future where we have additional bond funds to complete that building.
Okay, but that still isn't totally clear to me as to completing the building. What won't
I apologize.
students have if the bond doesn't pass?
Additional classrooms that would come with phase 2.
Which would handle more students?
Yes, it would double the number of students we could serve there. Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
And thank you for helping me clarify. I apologize if I wasn't clear.
No problem. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other questions for the speaker? Seeing none, we thank you, Dr. Fiddler, for your time this evening.
Thank
And next up is Gay Wandel.
Gay, you should be able to unmute yourself and you'll have 3 minutes once you begin.
I unmuted.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk. The reason I'm calling is because I live at, I have to give you my address, 6600 East 60th Avenue in Commerce City. I live in senior housing at 60th and Monaco. The reason I'm calling is because there are people who speed through this neighborhood and make unbelievable noise. Many of these vehicles are don't have mufflers, and they sound like jet engines or tornadoes taking off. I have to listen to all of the noise that these vehicles make, and that includes trucks, cars, anything. The ones that are causing all the horrible noise, though, are the people that drive without mufflers. And I don't understand why they're allowed to do that. I am not the only person complaining about people speeding through neighborhoods with these loud, obnoxious cars. If you go on next door for Commerce City, you will see all of the comments made by people that share my thoughts. I have a patio off my living room. I can't sit out there ever because of the noise. It's obvious to me that people that speed and make all this racket don't care about what they're doing. They ignore speed limits. They drive with no impunity. They know the likelihood of their getting caught speeding is next to none because Commerce City Police Department lacks the resources to place patrol cars at intersections like where I live. So my question is this: what can be done to address these issues? I'm done with my remarks.
Thank you, ma'am, for your comments. Does anybody on council have any questions for the speaker? Seeing none, we thank you again for your time this evening. Our last speaker of the evening is Steve Douglas.
Steve, you should be able to unmute yourself and you'll have 3 minutes once you begin.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for taking action with Oakwood mowing the open space within their properties throughout the northern area. Not just in the neighborhood where I live, but the golf course all over. That really helped, especially line of sight near a intersection. Second, I was looking at the agenda with the widening of 88th, and I didn't see on the RFP the construction of a grade separation over the second section of the railroad, because that's really important. I understand widening is needed, greatly needed, but that grade separation would most likely benefit the people who are leaving our city from their daily commute and other commuters coming into the city. And then third, I know you guys want to talk about Potomac Farms and eminent domain. I just kind of feel that they should hash that out to courts first before you guys intervene. At least give that a shot with the courts. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Douglas. Does anyone on council have any questions for Mr. Douglas? Seeing none, we thank you for your time this evening. I'd like to thank all of you for speaking with us tonight. If follow-up is necessary, you should expect to be contacted by a staff member. Members of the public were also able to submit comments online and by mail. No written comments were received by the deadline. If anyone wishes to speak at a future council meeting, please check the meeting agenda and city website for information on how to register or submit written comments. Next on our agenda is a proclamation. The proclamation declares July 2021 as Parks and Recreation Month in Commerce City. Will the city clerk please read the proclamation?
Whereas parks and recreation programs are an integral part of communities throughout this country, including Commerce City, and whereas our parks and recreation are vitally important to establishing and maintaining the quality of life in our communities, ensuring the health of all citizens, and contributing to the economic and environmental well-being of a community, and whereas parks and recreation programs build healthy, active communities that aid in the prevention of chronic disease, provide therapeutic recreation services for individuals with disabilities, and also improve the mental and emotional health of all citizens, and whereas parks and recreation areas are fundamental to the environmental well-being of our community, and whereas our parks and natural recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of our community and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors, and whereas the U.S. House of Representatives has designated July as Parks and Recreation Month, and whereas the City of Commerce City recognizes the benefits derived from parks and recreation resources. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Mayor Benjamin Huseman, on behalf of City Council, hereby proclaim that the month of July 2021 is recognized as Parks and Recreation Month in the City of Commerce City, and encourage all citizens to share the individual benefits that come from parks and recreation.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. Looking for a motion and a second to approve the proclamation. Mayor Pro Tem.
Motion to approve the proclamation as read.
Councilmember Madera.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the proclamation. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, we will do a voice vote. Please give me a thumbs up in the window. And that is going to pass unanimously 8-0 with one absence. Next up, we have the Gfoa Award for Outstanding Achievement in Popular Financial Reporting and Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for the year ending 2019. Are there any members of council that wish to make any comments regarding this award? Councilmember Madera.
I just want to commend our finance team. I think I forget how many years in a row they've received this award, and sometimes we take it for granted because it's at this point more of an expectation than an award, I feel like. But so I just don't want it to go take it for granted, and appreciate all the hard work that goes into this from our finance team.
Thank you, Councilmember Madera. Any other council members wish to make any comments? Seeing none, would like to also congratulate the finance team and thank you for all the hard work that you do in keeping the finances looking as good as they do in the city. Even the reports that you've been sending out monthly have been phenomenal, and really allows us to see just how good of a position we're in financially, and really appreciate the information that it flows, the timeliness that it flows in, and the accuracy of the reports that are provided to us. And those three things I know contribute towards you guys receiving this award again. And just want to congratulate you and thank you again for all the hard work. I'll now turn it over to Ms. Carsons.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of council. It's nice to join you tonight for the Gfoa Award announcements. I want to make sure that when we receive the notification of the awards, Gfoa provides us written comments on items that they're recommending we incorporate into future awards. We take those comments seriously and will continue to incorporate those into all of our documents when appropriate. We want to make sure we're continuing to meet the standards and requirements that GFOA sets forth so we can continue to compete for those awards. I also would like to thank you for your kind comments tonight, and I'd like to recognize and thank every member of my finance team. Without the contributions that they make daily, we would not be able to compete for these awards. So I certainly want them to know how much I appreciate them, and I will pass along your kind words to them as well. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you again to your team for all the hard work.
Thanks.
Next on the agenda are presentations. First presentation is the COVID-19 update. I'd like to invite City Manager Roger Tinklenberg to provide an update on the city's overall response to the COVID-19 crisis.
Thank you, Mayor. One announcement, the Jumpstart Grant Program ends on June 26th. So timeline is short to take advantage of that state grant program. And that's offered through the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. And it offers $1,200 as a grant to qualified unemployed recipients that return to work between May 16 and June 26. So it's a reward for going back to work, an enticement to take a full-time job. And the recipient has to remain in that job for at least 8 weeks in order to claim the grant. And there's more information about it available on the state website, again, through the Department of Labor and Employment. Also, just an update on several things. Adams County vaccination rates have risen. They're not moving very fast, but they are rising, which is a good thing. One dose is 61.7% of our population. 2 doses is at 53.7%. So we have a ways to go yet. Internally, we have a new mask policy for employees. Vaccinated employees no longer need to wear masks. However, if a fellow employee or a member of the public asks them to, then they are required to put on a mask. Also, any employee may continue wearing a mask if that's for their own health reasons or for their own comfort level. We encourage them to make that choice. Starting in July, we will open non-recreation facilities on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of each week. And again, that's by appointment only. That appointment system is easy to use and has been working successfully. Recreation centers are already at full capacity now. Also, starting July 6th, we're asking employees who have been working remotely to be in the office at least 2 days per week. There are positions where employees will have to share desks in the near future. And so their schedules will need to be coordinated because we will have to go to basically office hoteling. Then also an update on the council study sessions. So we are planning on study sessions. Looking at the chamber's floor, it's very labor intensive. So what's being evaluated at this point is either meeting on the dais with plexiglass dividers, or the other solution will be to set up the meetings on the floor of the chambers with hardwired microphones and leaving that setup in place for the month of July, even during court sessions. So we'll see if that works with court and see which option looks better. And then also housing has obligated $347,000 of the money that's available for emergency rental assistance program. And that's about 29% of the money that's available has been obligated. So there's still a lot of room for additional recipients in that program. And that's it for COVID update. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tingelberg. Councilmember Noble.
Mr. Tinklenberg, Adams County Commissioners went back to their regular meetings, and resumed their regular meetings, left remote last week. And could you let us know when you see that happening? Any dates in mind?
Our current plan was to, and I think I talked about this previously, but to go to the regular meetings in person in August. We were not planning on opening that up to the public yet at that time. In other words, those would be hybrid meetings where people would still participate remotely. We can revisit that, but that's the current plan at this point.
Okay, yes, because there are other cities that are going back into their chambers as well. And I believe that Adams County commissioners are having the public attend their meetings. I don't see anything wrong though with having hybrid meetings for communications for people who want to still talk to us via remote. I hope that we can continue that as well, but the sooner we can get back to normal, I think the better for everyone. Thank you.
Certainly.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Tinklenberg? Seeing none, thank you for the update, sir. Thank you for the work of staff that is getting us there. Next is an update on the Veterans Commission. Would like to invite John Borgelli, staff liaison, to introduce the presentation.
Evening, Honorable Mayor and Council. Dylan, I believe we have some slides. If you could go ahead and share those. And I am joined, so this is an update for the Veterans Commission. I am the staff liaison. I am joined tonight by Reverend Robert Carpenter, our vice chair, and Ms. Christina Castle, who is one of the commissioners on the commission. Next slide, please. So our purpose here tonight is to provide a little bit of background on the commission, who we are and what we're trying to do, share some of the tasks we've accomplished, and then preview things that we have upcoming. And before we get too much into that, I will give the two members who are joining us tonight on the presentation a chance to introduce themselves. Christina, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, say a little bit about who you are, your background and why you chose to serve on the commission.
Hi, yeah, like you said, my name is Christina. I served in the Navy for 6 years as an electronics technician until 2015. And then my husband and I relocated from Norfolk, Virginia, back here to Denver to be near family. Or I'm sorry, the Denver area. And I just wanted to be a part of my community and do what I could to help Commerce City just come together in whatever way. And the Veterans Commission gave me an opportunity to find people looking to do the same. And it's been a great opportunity.
Thank you. And Reverend?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yes. I'm Reverend Robert Carpenter. I'm originally from Virginia as well. My wife and I we lived in Chesapeake, and we moved here to Commerce City, and we enjoy it very much. I'm over the Veterans Ministry at Shorter Community AME Church in Denver, Colorado, and I am a retired district manager of labor relations with the United States Postal Service. I served in the United States Air Force. I'm a Vietnam War veteran, and I'm very excited about the direction the Veterans Commission is going as vice chair in enhancing the quality of life of our veteran community here in Commerce City.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Next slide. So this a little bit, this is the mission statement that we've adopted, and Reverend, if you want to speak a little bit more about just kind of a high level overview, quick bullet points about the commission, our mission, and what we're trying to do.
All right. Who are we and what we're about? As I stated earlier, the Veterans Commission We advise the city council on matters related to the veterans community within the city of Commerce City, as well as foster greater understanding of the veterans community, increase visibility of veterans and veterans issues within the city. We also entertain increasing community engagement by veterans, informing and educating the veterans community of available services, programs, resources, and advocates for various veterans issues important to veterans within the Commerce City community. Our mission statement of the Veterans Commission, we also advises the multiplicity on various veterans issues pertaining to the city's diverse group of veterans through establishing relationships, building veterans programs, and empowering veterans in our community so that they are connected with the various programs and also up to date on various veterans issues, as well as the laws that govern the veterans affairs.
Thank you for that. Next slide.
In addition, we also have, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say too, in addition, we have also established a liaison rapport with United States Congressman Ed Pittermiller and for Congressional 7. And we're working with him on various congressional issues that affect the veterans community as well.
All right, thank you. Next slide, please. Just a quick snapshot of who we currently have on the commission. As you can see, we have pretty good representation across the branches, still working to try to get some Marines. But otherwise, you know, a lot of Air Force, having Buckley right here is a great resource for that. A couple Army, a couple former Navy, and then myself currently in the Colorado Army National Guard as well. Next slide, please. And next slide. So a little bit about what we've already accomplished. One of the first things we did was put together an informational brochure that we've been working to distribute throughout the community through our own networks. It includes resources for veterans as well as current service members. So we're looking to help not just veterans in the community, but also, since we do have Buckley in the area, members who are currently serving. It includes a little bit of background information on the commission, as well as a list of current services that are offered by the city targeted towards veterans, but also in the greater community through other channels as well. Additionally, we held the Memorial Day event last month. We had approximately 40 people attend in person, which was more than we thought we would be able to have at the start of the year. It was great to be able to actually start to open things up to the public. We had about 40 in person and about that many who were watching the live stream at the time. We were able also to put together some social media posts from that, and those have gotten some great reactions and great traction within the community. And we also did have Congressman Perlmutter in attendance as well. Having council and some VIPs there was a great boost. Next slide, please. Just some pictures from the event. I just want to take this moment to thank everyone on council who was involved in this, and also on the Veterans Commission, everyone working together to ensure that we had a great event. Thought it really fit the mood of the day very well. We're very excited to be going back to the parade next year, but we're also looking to take some of the lessons learned from this year as well, moving forward. Next slide. And then a couple things we have coming down the pipe. We are the Veterans Commission is starting a kind of a lunch and learn, starting first on a quarterly basis. Our first one scheduled for August, where we'll have various benefits or resources that are open to veterans. So this coming August, we'll have someone talking about PTSD and trauma. Is something that really affects the veterans community. We have 22 former service members take their lives every day with suicide. And so being able to have that space where we can talk about that and get people connected to the resources they need will be something that will be hugely important and a huge benefit to the community in the area. And looking to, at first at a quarterly basis, have events like that every quarter, hopefully getting to the point where we can start upping the tempo to have more frequent events. We are also starting to brainstorm things that we could do for Veterans Day in November and developing additional programming. We've started to come up with a few other ideas as well, but those are still kind of in the crawl stage as opposed to the lunch and learn, which is more, closer to the walk or run phase of planning. Reverend or Christina, do you guys have anything else to add? I think this is our last slide.
No, I'm good on my end.
And now turning it over, does
Go
council
ahead.
have any, does council have any questions for us?
Does anybody on council have any questions for the Veterans Commission? Councilmember Hurst.
Yeah, I just wanted to, there are more comments, but I just wanted to show my appreciation for the participation in the event on Memorial Day. I thought that was a really good compromise to what we had options for us, and I thought it was well done and well received. And then just want to offer, at least personally, if this commission ever wants to reach out to council, or specifically me for some help, please feel free to do so. I was very excited to see this commission kick off, and as we interviewed and made recommendations on all the candidates for this, I couldn't be more excited about the group that was put together for this commission. So thank you for your commitment and your hard work, and can't wait to see what the future brings for this commission.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions from council? Seeing none, would like to thank the three of you for your time this evening for this presentation, as well as for all the great work you're doing on the commission. And as a veteran, I look forward to seeing the great things that you do for our community and the veterans that desperately need the help.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all for your time this evening.
Thank you, sir.
Next on the agenda is an update on the 2022 work plan goals and targets. Would like to invite Kathy Blakeman, Deputy City Manager, to make the presentation.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council. Jordan, can you go ahead and pull up the 2022 goal and objective setting? Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Okay, Council, we wanted to bring this forward to you. There were a few changes that you had requested the last time that we were here a couple of weeks ago. So we've gone ahead and made those changes. Those that are highlighted in yellow are things that were either changed or they were added. In particular, with the first one on that first slide, Jordan, we added that one in to preserve and protect Commerce City's historic resources. And then on the second slide, we added or changed up the wording just slightly on those last three that are there. One is to add network solutions. So we just added solutions onto the back of that. And then the other ones were to be a little more equitable and inclusive as it pertained to our citizen participation, and also looking at homelessness as a regional issue, as had been also requested to take a look at. So wanted for you all to have an opportunity to take a look at this, see if there were any other sorts of changes or additions that you might want to see to this document, so that we can be sure that it's completed the way that you would like for it to be.
Are there any questions from council? Seeing no request for questions, I'm looking for a motion and a second to adopt the 2022 work plan goals and targets. Mayor Pro Tem.
So moved.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to adopt the 2022 work plan goals and targets. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, we'll do a voice vote by show of hands. And that will pass unanimously 8-0 with one absence. Thank you very much for your time this evening, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. The consent agenda includes items that are routine, procedural, informational, self-explanatory, and non-controversial. They are presented to council for a single motion and vote. Any member of council may ask to remove a specific item for further discussion and a separate vote. Tonight, there are 8 items listed under the consent agenda. Does anyone on council wish to remove an item off the consent agenda for further discussion? Seeing no request to do so, I'm looking for a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Mayor Pro Tem.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Will the city clerk please read the titles and take a roll call vote?
Minutes of the March 30, 2021 special meeting, minutes of April 12th, 2021, minutes of April 17th, 2021, minutes of May 24th, 2021, resolution 2021-45, a resolution authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental agreement with the Colorado Department of Transportation regarding funding for the Vasquez Boulevard Improvements Project. Resolution 2021-46, a resolution authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute a contract with EST Inc. for design and pre-construction services for the 88th Avenue widening project. Resolution 2021-49, resolution approving Second Amendment to the intergovernmental agreement between the City of Commerce City and the Regional Transportation District RTD regarding artwork for the North Metro Rail Line. And Resolution 2021-50, resolution approving request by 27J School District for transfer of school site and disbursement of school fees for an elementary school at South Lawn in Commerce City. Councilmember Madera,
Yes.
Councilmember Alan Thomas,
Yes.
Councilmember Noble,
Yes.
Councilmember Guardiola,
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst,
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes, Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Frank,
Yes.
Mayor Huseman.
Yes.
Passes unanimously with one excused absence.
Sir. Next up, we have resolutions. Our first resolution is Resolution 2021-47 for amending the Potomac Farms Metropolitan District Intergovernmental Agreement. I'd like to invite John Borgelli, Management Analyst, to make the presentation and to introduce the applicant.
Good evening again, Honorable Mayor and Council. So we're talking about a grant of a potential waiver that would amend the district activities IGA of the Potomac Farms Metro District to grant them eminent domain in a limited case. A little bit of background and there's a little bit more detail in your council communication. We also do have the applicant available to answer questions as well. But Potomac Farm, a representative of the Potomac Farms District, had reached out to the city seeking this waiver to have eminent domain in this particular case. A little bit of background. The land is currently owned, question is currently owned by a developer. That developer is no longer operational, and the applicant has attempted to contact them to no avail. And so they are seeking to be granted eminent domain in this case to purchase that land in order to develop it. The land's currently vacant and will otherwise continue to sit vacant and undeveloped. And they would like to be able to develop that land for the purposes of the district. Granting this waiver and allowing eminent domain in this case will not substantially affect the financial plan of the district. Having this land taken out of what's paying taxes into the district will not result in increases in mill levies on the other parcels of land. Since this land has been sitting vacant, it has not been paying property taxes for about the last 10 years. So this won't affect the financial plan of the district. This waiver is limited in scope only to the parcels that are outlined before you this evening. So it won't grant the district eminent domain in all cases, just over these particular parcels. If hopefully that answers a few questions preemptively, but council has additional questions either for staff or for the applicant, we are available.
Does anyone on council have any questions for staff or for Mr. Wolfesberger? Councilmember Noble.
Yes. So 2 questions. One involves why the city is doing this rather than some other method. And secondly, Do we know for certain that this property isn't caught up in, for example, an estate situation, that somebody has passed away and it's just a matter of tracking down the owners and so forth? How much due diligence has been done to find the owner of this property? Thank you.
I can answer the first question, although I see Robert has turned his video on and raised his hand, so maybe I should let him say something first.
I'd just be happy to pipe in on the first one. I believe Mr. Wolfersberger can answer the diligence question on the back end. I want to make clear to council that the city is not condemning any property. It is not exercising its authority of eminent domain. The city is not expending any funds or incurring any liability and won't be involved in the acquisition of the property or the ownership after. The Metro District as a government entity would have that authority under the Special District Act, but for the service plan for Potomac Farms, which only allows that, which limits the use of eminent domain by the district unless it's allowed in the intergovernmental agreement between the district and the city about the service plan. And that's what the resolution accomplishes, is authorizing an amendment to allow that limited use. And so that's why the city is involved. It's through its approval of the service plan, however many years ago it was, and the amendment to that. It's allowing the district to expand its authority just a little bit in this situation. And Mr. Wolfersberger, I know, can answer the diligence question and the use probably of the site. But I will say that if the district does commence eminent domain proceedings, they will be obligated to go through a rigorous court process, naming government officials and actually actively finding out who may be the owner, publishing, going through title work, and making sure that anybody who has a potential property interest is notified and compensated. And the court would determine that.
Then it seems to me that my second question is actually unnecessary because it would be taken care of elsewhere, that we're simply making an adjustment in the service agreement in order to allow Potomac Farms to move forward to make any further, and it will be decided by other parties. So Mr. Wolfersberger, I retract my question. Thank you.
Mr. Wolfersberger.
Sorry, now I'm off mute. Yeah, I won't take up too much of the council's time here. It's a pretty I think it's a pretty straightforward issue. It's just the strange 2008. This is still a cleanup to 2008 market crash issue where you have several land tracts that were just owned by the developer. There were open spaces. They're already landscaped, and the district's been maintaining those landscape tracts for quite a while. We just don't have, the district doesn't have ownership of those tracts. And actually, we wouldn't even be here tonight for that issue because we probably just wouldn't bother. But there's two reasons why we have to. We're trying to fix this land ownership issue on these open space land tracts. One is, as you may be aware, Potomac Farms is installing monument signs, which I'm actually excited to see those lit up eventually around the perimeter of their neighborhood. And there was somewhat of an issue where I think a few of those monument signs, they're being installed on property it's one of those land tracts that's owned by the land developer. And I think it was maybe a holdup with the city because the city was asking questions. Why are we installing monument signs on land that's owned by some other land development company? And so that's one issue we're trying to clear up. And the other item is, which is the bigger issue, is that fire station that's next to, that land tract right next to the fire station at Potomac and the 104th Drive, maybe. That land tract is actually supposed to be owned per the plat map by the Metropolitan District, and it's unlandscaped. And the board has taken out some funds. They have some funding to get that land tract landscaped. The problem is right now they don't own it. And so, but under the whole development plan since the very beginning, many, many years ago, that was supposed to be an open space land tract, a park or something owned by the district. And so they now have the funding to get that tract landscaped. They just don't own it yet. And we can't get the land developer to respond to any of our letters, and they've been sent by the attorneys trying to get. we just wish they'd sign a simple warranty deed and we'd be done with it, but we can't seem to get them to do that. So, so that's what we're trying to accomplish here.
Thanks, sir, for that clarification. Are there any other questions or comments from council? Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I was just curious, in part of the notes, it said something about it, that it was I don't know the history of the property, but a public health and safety issue part of that property. Can you tell us a little bit what that was about? Because I don't know the history of the property.
I'm not sure about if there's any health or safety issues. These are all the tracks in question are essentially just parks and open spaces. There's literally only the land tract next to the fire station and it's probably a 1.5 acre tract of land. That's really the only large land tract that's unlandscaped. All the other small, like little pocket parks and open spaces are just scattered throughout the neighborhood. Those are already landscaped and maintained by the district. So yeah, I'm not aware of, unless there's something else and maybe some of the documentation about health and safety, but I'm not aware of.
Do you know why that was in the note in our president? Yeah, go ahead, Robert.
Councilmember, no, I think I can answer. I believe you're looking at the resolution itself. That has under the findings section, it's just a recitation of the council's authority, which is generally based on regulating public health, safety, and welfare and acting in the interest of that. So it is your finding that this is a good thing and that you have power to do it, essentially. But there is no particular public health need presented by this property that we're aware of.
Okay, great. Thank you, Robert.
Are there any other questions regarding this? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion and a second to adopt resolution 2021-47. Councilmember Alan Thomas.
So moved.
Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem.
A second.
I have a second and a motion to adopt resolution 2021-47. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, will the clerk please read the title?
Resolution 2021-47, a resolution approving an amendment intergovernmental agreement to the City of Commerce City and Potomac Farms Metropolitan District regarding the service plan for the district to grant a limited authorization of eminent domain.
And we will do a voice vote. Please give me a thumbs up in the chat window if you approve of this resolution. And that is going to pass 8-0 with 1 absence. Thank you very much for everybody involved. We'll now move on to resolution 2021-48, which is amending resolution 2020-77 to modify the membership of the Commerce City Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission. Looking for a motion and a second to adopt resolution 2021-48. Mayor Pro Tem.
Motion to approve as stated.
Councilmember Noble. Councilmember Noble.
I'm sorry, I thought I clicked it open. I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second to adopt resolution 2021-48. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, will the clerk please read the title?
Resolution 2021-48, resolution amending resolution 2020-77 to modify the membership of the Commerce City Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission.
And thank you, sir, for that. We will do a voice vote. Please give me a thumbs up in the chat window. And that is going to pass unanimously 8-0 with 1 absence. Next, we will move on to ordinances. We have 3 ordinances this evening. We'll do the first one, which is Ordinance 2332, recognition of the Defense Council First Appearance Grant. Does anyone on council have any questions for staff regarding this ordinance? Seeing no questions, I'm looking for a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading Ordinance 2332. Mayor Pro Tem.
Sorry about that. Motion to approve by council is seated on first reading.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading ordinance 2332. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, will the city clerk please read the title and take a roll call vote?
Ordinance 2332, an ordinance amending the 2021 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by the recognition of the Defense Council First Appearance Grant of $15,000 for the Defense Council First Appearance Program and the authorization of the expenditure thereof. Councilmember Madera,
Yes.
Councilmember Alan Thomas,
Yes.
Councilmember Noble,
Yes.
Councilmember Guardiola,
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst,
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes, Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Frank,
Yes.
Mayor Huseman,
Yes.
passes unanimously with one excused absence.
Thank you, sir. We'll now move on to ordinance 2336, funding support to Commerce City Schools. Does anyone on council have any questions for staff? Seeing no questions at this time, are there any amendments that anybody wishes to propose to this ordinance? Councilmember Guardiola.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't know if it's an amendment, but I would like to know if we could just use the same sponsorship process, because that has the to get the information what the school is going to use it for. Our staff, have we decided on what the process is? But I think since Reunion Elementary used that and it gave us a good information, could we just use something very similar? I guess that's for staff or.
Yeah, I don't know why not. Robert, any legal reason why we wouldn't be able to do that?
Just reviewing the ordinance. No, I believe the city manager would implement a structure, and if that makes sense, I assume he would follow that.
Perfect. And do the 19 schools also include the charters in Commerce City?
I believe, and I'm not the financial person, but I believe that the number is based on the 27J and Adams 14 schools, and those are the only schools authorized by this ordinance to receive funds.
Then I think I would like to make an amendment to include the charter schools that are in our city. I know there's 2 in Adams 14, and I believe Bell Creek, Landmark up in the northern range. I just think if any school, charter or public, is in Commerce City, they should be able to apply for these funds. So I don't know.
Is that your motion?
Yes, sir.
A motion to amend the ordinance to include 4 additional schools, which would 2 charter schools in the Adams 14th School District and 2 charter schools in the 27J School District, all serving Commerce City residents. Mayor Pro Tem.
A second.
I have a motion and a second for that amendment. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Mr.
Mayor, I
Shi?
just want to thank you. I should wait to be recognized. I apologize. I assume also then that would include increasing the funding amount from $47,500 from the general fund in the amount of $10,000. Was it 4 schools?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Hurst.
Didn't sound like we were totally confident that they weren't already included. So I guess I just didn't want that to be left unsaid. If they're already included, obviously we're advocating for no change.
Is there any other discussion on the amendment to include the 4 charter schools if they're not already included, increasing the expenditure by $10,000? Councilmember Hurst.
Sorry.
Seeing no other request for discussion, we'll do a voice vote. Please give me a thumbs up in the window if you approve this amendment. That's going to pass 8-0 with 1 absence. Are there any other proposed amendments at this time? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion in a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading ordinance 2336 as amended to include 4 charter schools and an additional $10,000 in expenditures. Councilmember Alan Thomas.
So moved.
Councilmember Noble.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading ordinance 2336 as amended to include 4 charter schools and additional $10,000 in expenditures. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, will the city clerk please read the title and take a roll call vote? Wait a minute. Oh, he was just turning off his camera. Will the city clerk please read the title and take a roll call vote?
Ordinance 2336, an ordinance amending the 2021 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by appropriating $57,500 from the general fund balance to provide funding to support to Commerce City schools and the authorization of the expenditure thereof. Councilmember Madera,
Yes.
Councilmember Alan Thomas,
Yes.
Councilmember Noble,
Yes.
Councilmember Guardiola,
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst,
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes, Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Frank,
Yes.
Mayor Huseman.
Yes.
Passes unanimously with 1 excused absence.
Thank you, sir. Next, we'll move on to ordinance 2337, alternative sentencing for fireworks violations by minors. Does anyone on council have any questions for staff? Seeing none at this time, are there any amendments proposed to the ordinance? Seeing none, I would like to actually propose an amendment to this ordinance. I noticed while reading it, it does not state what the alternative sentencing would be. So there's no guideline on there as far as how many hours of community service would be or any of that. And that one doesn't sit very well with me. So before I continue, I'll let Mr. Sheasley interject.
Thank you. I think I understand where you're going with setting a minimum of that type of standard. The judge, as far as types of alternative sentencing, whether it's community service or anything else, is set forth elsewhere in the code. So just so you're aware, if you do set a minimum, which is fine, I don't know the judge's typical sentencing in that amount, but we could certainly include that here.
Okay, thank you. So I would like to propose an amendment that we set either some type of timetable for each dollar value, be it 1 hour of community service per dollar of the fine or half-hour community service. I will tell you, there's been some events that have taken place recently in our community that just disgust me. And most of them are attributed to teenagers and to children who are unsupervised, include graffiti in our parks with statements that are just downright disgusting and have no business being done in our city. People's pools being destroyed with launch furniture being thrown in the pool and broken bottles and glass everywhere, and just complete disregard for the community as a whole. And I think that although I agree not necessarily putting a fine on minors who are caught with fireworks that are illegal, I do believe that there needs to be a minimum sentence that is out there very similar to what the adults would, because we need to send a message that that kind of behavior is not appropriate in our community and we will not stand behind it. So I'd like to make a motion that we amend this to have it equal $1 fine is equal to half an hour community service for the punishment for that.
So, Mr. Mayor, may I phrase that to add a sentence? Forgive my math. That would be for a minimum $500 fine. That would be an equivalent of 250 hours of community service?
It would.
Okay. And so I would recommend that your motion be to amend Exhibit A at Section E to add a new sentence that says any alternative sentence of community service shall be not less than $1 for every half hour, or I'm sorry, a half hour of community service for every dollar of potential fine subject to the minimum standards in this section.
Yes.
Okay.
That sounds good.
Thank you. It was not great, but it'll work.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
I second the motion.
We have a proposed amendment that would set a minimum of half an hour per dollar fine for this violation by minors, as opposed to the financial obligation. Is there any discussion? Mr. Sheasley?
I actually meant to put my hand down, but I did need to say one more thing. As I mentioned, I don't know if that is out of line with the typical community service hours ordered by the court or how that might be viewed. And so while it's fine to do that, we haven't been able to consider the ramifications of it.
Yeah. Councilmember Madera.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to hear from the judge on this and, know a little bit more of like what alternative types of punishment he usually gives out. Because I think we're kind of assuming that the only alternative is community service hours, and kind of doing the same thing where the problem with this before was, you set these bright line rules where there's a specific punishment, and you take that that ability away from the judge to be able to determine what's the best course of action, best type of punishment for the type of crime that was committed. So, I think I would rather see more information from the judge before coming up with something like this. Not to mention, it seems a little harsh where we're kind of making the connection for one thing to something completely unrelated, and kind of applying that punishment based off of that, because fireworks and pools are not exactly related. So I think it's 250 hours is a little harsh, especially not knowing if it's a kid who's lighting one bottle rocket or one black cat, or a kid who's lighting off artillery shells and some of these bigger fireworks. And so I think we should leave the judgment in the judge's hands instead of trying to legislate that and come up with the floor ourselves. I think the judge has showed us that he has a lot of different alternative types of punishments that he gives out to juveniles instead of getting them in the system that he likes to use for some of these other crimes that we've seen when he talks to us. And so I think by doing this, where we're setting a minimum of 250 hours of community service, we're really doing a disservice to not only the minors of our community, but to our judge.
Councilmember Noble.
Thank you, Councilmember Madera. That was something I hadn't thought about, and I appreciate that. I had my hand raised though, because in the past we had some cars that had items stolen from them, cars, unlocked cars, and it was done by juveniles. And according to a presentation by members of the police department, those juveniles were returned directly to their parents without going through the court system at all. So I think there's a component to this that involves law enforcement as in addition, and which of these kids will actually make it before the judge is something to consider as well. Because I don't know what the policy is at the police department. I see that the Chief Nichols is on. Perhaps he could talk about that. Oh, and secondarily, the Denver Police Department has put out a notice not to call 911 if they're illegal fireworks. So maybe this is sort of an opportunity to talk about what our police department is going to be doing and how they will respond.
There was a question for me, Mr. Mayor. Is it okay if I go ahead and answer that?
Yes, sir. Please
Yes,
do.
I'm not certain what incident you're talking about, but whenever we arrest juvenile for crimes, generally speaking, we do not take them to jail if they don't meet the point threshold for going to jail. It would need to be a violent crime involving a weapon. Generally speaking, there's a million laws, so I don't want to speak out of turn if that's the only reason they go to jail. Oftentimes, they're written a summons in the court, and then they're released to their parents. So they do enter the criminal justice system. A lot of that is left up to the discretion of the officer, the severity of the crime, and trying to establish some restorative justice for the victim. As it relates to our plans for this 4th of July, we are in fact going to be beefing up staffing, I believe, next Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday leading up to the event. I think it's important to note that we also have a giant event taking place at Dick's Sporting Goods related to fireworks. So the majority of our staffing will be over at that event, but we will be responding to, we have dedicated fireworks response teams that are going to be responding to these types of events. Make no mistake about it, we get inundated with calls for fireworks. There's no way we're going to be able to respond to all of them. We do our best. And generally speaking, most of our officers can't get off of a city block without finding another fireworks violation. I think it is important to note that the rules have changed slightly. So we're going to have problems impounding fireworks, quite frankly. The way the rules are written with the NFPA rules regarding what can be seized and what cannot be seized, to make sure we don't assume any evidentiary issues. We probably will not be seizing any fireworks unless we can absolutely establish that they are illegal. I think it is important to note that sometimes these fireworks are not in English, and so we won't be able to distinguish that. So we'll be making a transition from impounding those things and having to keep them for 45 days if someone wants to come pick them up. Generally speaking, when they were all illegal, it was easier for us to take everything and destroy it. Our evidence vault is not equipped to house explosives. So we're not going to be taking any fireworks at all this year, unless we can absolutely ascertain that it is of an illegal kind. Hopefully that answers your questions, ma'am.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hurst.
Yeah, I agree with the minimum penalty and along the lines of, you know, all that we've seen around our community lately. But I'm not sure I can go to 250 hours, or I agree with that. I think if we look at even minimum wage and the cost benefit ratio to that for somebody that, you know, we were at basically saying it's cheaper to pay the $500, but if you don't have it, it's going to cost you more in opportunity lost at work. And so I, you know, would support maybe 100 hours at a maximum for a $500 fee, if, you know, 200 hours for $1,000 fee. Just because the way the math works out in my head, I just, you know, think that we could be potentially saying if you don't have $500 up front, it's going to actually end up costing you quite a bit more to pay your fine, you know, based off of the value of your work as you're doing community service.
Mr. Sheasley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was able to reach out to Judge Juarez during the discussion just to see if he could advise on what his standard is. And he does, of course, continue to believe that sentencing should be left to his discretion. And he recommended a minimum of 12 hours. And then he believes that there's a 120-hour maximum that he could impose with respect to community service. So I just wanted to make sure you have that information until we're able to do more research on the question.
Thank you. Given that, I would amend my amendment to impose the maximum 120 hours for a minor who's caught with illegal fireworks. Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Yes, I'll remove mine also for the amendment.
Was that, are you still seconding the amendment as amended, or are you removing your second?
I'm removing my second with Judge Juarez's recommendations.
Okay. So the motion is to amend this ordinance to have a minimum, or to have a 120-hour public service requirement for a minor who is caught with illegal fireworks. Is there a second? Seeing no second, the motion will fail and we will move on. Are there any other proposed amendments to the motion? Seeing none. Looking for a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve as an emergency ordinance on first reading, ordinance 2337. Councilmember Madera.
So moved.
Councilmember Wadiola.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approved as an emergency ordinance on first reading, ordinance 2337. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, will the clerk please read the title and take a roll call vote?
Ordinance 2337, an emergency ordinance amending section 1-3003 of the Commerce City Revised Municipal Code to authorize the municipal court to impose alternative sentencing for fireworks violations by minors. Councilmember Madera.
Yes.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Yes.
Councilmember Noble,
Yes.
Councilmember Guardiola,
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst,
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes, Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Frank,
Yes.
Mayor Huseman,
Yes.
passes unanimously with one excused absence.
Thank you, sir. Next on the agenda is administrative council business per council policy, except for emergency or unforeseen items. Council members are encouraged to submit administrative business items by the Tuesday before the meeting with another council member's endorsement. No items were submitted by council members by the deadline. We have a couple items on administrative council business. The first is council appointments to the Commerce City Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission. The resolution adopted by the council tonight amended the commission to add 2 regular council members and 1 alternate council member. Are there any council members wishing to serve on the commission as a regular member? Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to serve as a regular member.
Councilmember Guardiola.
I also would like to serve as a regular member.
Are there any others? Thank you. Are there any council members wishing to serve on the commission as an alternate member? Councilmember Madera.
I'll volunteer to be an alternate.
Thank you, sir. Are there any others? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion and a second to appoint Councilmember Alan Thomas and Councilmember Guardiola to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission and Councilmember Madera as an alternate. Councilmember Noble.
So moved.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to appoint Councilmember Alan Thomas and Councilmember Guardiola to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission and Councilmember Madera as an alternate. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, we'll do a voice vote by raising our hands. And that is going to pass 8-0 with 1 absence. Next, we have consideration of request for a veto of House Bill 21-1314. Would like to invite Robert Sheasley, the city attorney, to introduce the item.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Excuse me, I need to move to a different location in my home office for a moment. Thank you for bearing with me. As you may read in the packet, the municipal judge recommended an amendment, or I'm sorry, veto request regarding House Bill 21-1314 that was passed by the General Assembly to ask the governor to veto the bill due to its impact on municipal law enforcement and municipal courts. The bill was passed with bipartisan support, I believe, but the veto request letter is in your packet for review. I'm here to answer any questions you might have. I think Mr. Bergeli may have additional information from our lobbyist, Aaron Goff, but I don't want to put him on the spot, but please let me know if you have any other questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Sheasley concerning this item? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion and a second to authorize my signature and issue the veto request letter regarding HB 21-1314. Councilmember Noble.
I'm sorry, I had questions. I just didn't get my hand up soon enough to ask questions.
Okay.
Yes, I'd like to know about the fiscal impacts, because one of the reasons that this bill passed and on a bipartisan nature is that when you remove the ability of someone to drive a car legally, they aren't able to get to work, and then they're not able to help their families. It just begins a spiral, which is what all of these bills that came forward this year were trying to avoid, so that you don't get people locked into a system. And I want to be able to balance it, but I need, more importantly, to understand what the repercussions are and what our alternatives are if we don't remove driver's license from any of these folks.
I believe I can answer the first question easier. If anybody else listening has an access to the court's last report to the city council, that could possibly give some light into the question as to what is the fiscal impact. excuse me, the fiscal impact, though, I will say, is obviously not the goal of the city. It does have an impact, but the city doesn't use its court for revenue generation. There's no indication that Commerce City's court in any way contributed to that sort of system. The bill itself did not take into account the impacts on municipalities or as to revenues or to law enforcement. It did take into account the state impact to the Department of Motor Vehicles and appropriated funds, I believe, for that purpose. Could you restate the first part of your question? I lost it in my rambling.
I'm not sure I did it in any particular order because I didn't have this written down for myself, but I just want to understand what the fiscal impact is on us. If there is no fiscal impact, I can't support this because the bill itself was passed and designed to not have anyone get trapped in a system that finds them having to drive without a license because they're trying to get to work, because they're trying to take care of their families, etc. And next thing you know, it starts a vicious cycle, and we find people who are part of the criminal justice system who really didn't need to be there if we had given them some leeway. And that's what this is about, is giving folks leeway. If it's not going to cost the city any money or not enough money for it to matter, then I wouldn't be able to support it.
I would say I do remember what I tagged as the first part, which is what is our other enforcement option, and that is to send matters to collections, which charges an additional fee if the collection agency is actually able to collect on it. Beyond that, legislation over the last few years has reduced the ability of municipal courts to impose either monetary penalties, to imprison people, except in very rare circumstances, to allow courts to require courts to release individuals earlier without monetary bond. I'm not advocating for or against any of those positions. However, I do understand that there's an impact on law enforcement and a perception that individuals do not face any consequence for municipal ordinance violations or traffic violations. And I do not know the fiscal impact or the amount that is lost if fines are sent to collections, or what our general revenue is. I don't imagine it is substantial in light of our overall budget, but I am not qualified to speak on that. So if there's any representative, yeah.
Mr. Sheasley, you said that they face no consequences. So you're saying the only consequence of not paying a fine is having your driver's license removed? I'm confused.
No, the driver's license removal is incentive for individuals, as I understand it, to pay their fines, which is the only consequence in many cases that municipalities can impose, especially in light of recent legislation. And so removing an avenue to recovering fines and imposing the consequences that the municipal court and the city council have deemed to be important, that's what the upshot of the bill is from a municipal perspective. The city doesn't suspend driver's licenses, as I understand it. The Department of Motor Vehicles does. We may report outstanding fines to the Department of Motor Vehicles, and then they take that action. The bill completely prohibits that.
Are there any other questions? Mayor Pro Tem.
I would like to make a motion to authorize the mayor to sign and issue the veto request letter regarding House Bill 21-1314.
Councilmember Hurst.
I second.
I have a motion and a second to authorize my signature to be affixed to the letter issuing the veto request letter regarding HB 21-1314. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Hurst.
Yeah, Councilwoman Noble, actually, I agree. You know, we do have cyclical issues in our system that really can become unfair, but it's going to be a really tough one to solve. I see both sides on this one, and this one I think is the intent is a valid first attempt, because I really think it is an issue, and that's why it was bipartisan. but I also think there's got to be more stakeholders at the table in the creation of this. You know, people that, you know, folks that actually run jails, those types of ground level stakeholders that can really call out some of these issues at the beginning and really solve for them. And so, you know, with this veto request, my hope would be that it comes back to a table full of stakeholders that can really drill down, solve the problem, and have the same impacts, you know, for the municipal court. So there is a way to collect those funds, because without that, we do continue seeing, you know, lower level crimes can, you know, continue to perpetuate over and over again, because quickly folks start to realize that there is no penalty, in that's an issue too. You know, there's both sides to the issue. And so just trying to find that balance, I think that you're saying as well, trying to seek that balance. I'm just not sure this is the perfect balance yet.
Councilmember Noble.
Thank you, Councilmember Hurst. I think your point that it needs to come back as a better bill, if you will, is well made. So I will take that into consideration in my vote. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments, discussion? Seeing no requests, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor, please give me a show of hands. And that is going to pass unanimously 8-0 with 1 absence. Is there any other administrative council business anybody wishes to bring up of an emergency or unforeseen nature or otherwise? Seeing none, we'll move on to reports. We'll start with City Manager Tinklenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. I have several items. One is that the closing on the RFP for the installation or the construction of a hotel at the Mile Greyhound Park, it closed today for the RFP. And I'm aware of 2 proposals that we have received, and have not received an update as of end of day. But also budgets, we're continuing to work on the reappropriation requests, and also working on the 2022 CIPP request, and we're starting on the 2022 budget requests as well. You know, the departments have been working on those for several months and have submitted all of their requests. We have an upcoming joint meeting with the 27J School Board. That is for June 29, so the end of this month. And 27J is hosting that meeting, and I wanted to alert all of you that that meeting, they're requesting in-person attendance at that meeting. So just making you aware of that. And then community development, active land use cases is at 193 at this point. So that number of cases continues to rise. Third Creek West, filings 1 and 2 and their design guidelines are nearing completion. And I also signed a certificate that the GID funding is in place, so that utilities and infrastructure construction can proceed. Murray Farms, the owner has selected a developer. Staff met with the developer several times, and we have informed the developer that we are not supportive of rezoning the entire land as industrial. What we asked for from the beginning is that there must be a buffer between the existing residential and the new industrial. So we'll see how that turns out. Finance, you received the monthly financial report today, and the good news is that revenues exceed expenditures by a healthy margin. So we'll see how that holds up as we get further into the year. We'll be starting, construction season. Well, it's actually started already. So we'll be seeing those expenditures come through in the next number of months. So that position will change. And then Parks and Recreation, I had mentioned earlier that the recreation centers are operating at full capacity, but we're still working on rebuilding the child care program, because we had to recertify staff and hire replacement staff for those that had moved on. And then also for your information, Paradise Island, that leak in the lazy river will require a shutdown, and that'll be hopefully ending on June 28th, but it's a 3-day shutdown, and or starting on June 28th, I'm sorry. And that will affect the Paradise Island River, the slides, and the lap pool, because those have to be closed. The contractor will be digging up concrete and grass. It's on the outside of the pool where the leak is occurring. And then also during that time, the activity pool and the tot area will still be open. So there's a partial closure of that facility. Lifeguards, I had mentioned before that we were short a number of VHE lifeguards, and that continues. We're still have a number of positions that are unfilled. We did just finish a lifeguarding class, and so we have several lifeguards that are now available to join the team. And then there's another class that ends on June 30, and that'll provide additional recruits for the lifeguard program. July 4, as mentioned earlier, the fireworks are planned at Dick's Sporting Goods Park, but due to the MLS, the Major League Soccer, those restrictions do not allow activities on the field. So council will not be participating in those activities like in past years, but there are tickets that will be made available to each council member. Turnberry Skate Park, we anticipate the construction to start about mid-July, and it's anticipated to be completed in the fall. In the police department, FOP negotiations are continuing, and today there were a number of officers that were sent to Arvada to deal with an active shooter situation, and we still have officers that are assisting there, so we're a little short on manpower today, but hopefully this evening they can wrap that up. In Public Works, we're still short 11 positions in the Parks Maintenance Division in VHEs, variable hour employees. We have raised the pay to $18 an hour, and they're still exploring third-party contractor to assist. Citywide fleet leasing, the program extends to November of 2022. However, we are seeing that we may run a little short in terms of the authorization, the dollar amount authorization to be able to get us through 2022. So staff is monitoring that actively to bring an amendment to you if we need to do that to be able to close out 2022 leasing of vehicles. And then because that contract is ending in 2022, I've directed staff to evaluate the effectiveness of the program and to make sure that it's doing what we're anticipating and wanting it to do. The facility assessment involved retro commissioning of the Civic Center. That's where they dig through all of the operating systems in the Civic Center. That report was delivered at the end of May for staff review. And so they're reviewing that and reviewing the energy audit to see if the energy measures that we've taken are performing as we planned. And then also one other update, the Eagle Point PDU replacement. That's the dehumidification unit that's on the ceiling of the pool. The equipment is deteriorated, and we received bids, and so staff are reviewing those bids, and they're also evaluating moving that project into 2022, primarily due to the long lead time necessary to get essential equipment like that. And we also have to coordinate that project with the Civic Center with the recreation center closing. So very likely that project will be taking place next year rather than this year. That's it for me at this point. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Does anyone on council have any questions for Mr. Tinklenberg regarding his report? Seeing none, thank you for all the information, and we'll move on to City Attorney Sheasley.
Thank you, Mayor Huseman. 2 items to note tonight. The first is that last week, the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission issued its proposed rulemaking on financial assurances. There's a limited time period for anyone to become an interested party and participate in the rulemaking. I would like to engage Matt Sura, who is also representing the city of Brighton, to represent the city in that. He notified us of that issuance and has provided an outline of some of the significant rule changes. So I am planning to engage him consistent with his current engagement with the city, and believe that is the right course of action. No action needed from you. I just wanted to let you know unless there's an objection. And then the second item was last week or the week before, the city received a request with respect to Landmark Academy. It's a very complicated question, but an Arizona government entity is issuing private activity bonds to loan money to one of the partners that operates Landmark Academy, National Heritage Schools, I believe it is, to be repaid by leasing of that facility from the school operator. They're doing this with a number of schools operated by that entity nationwide. That funding would be used for the purchase of the property from an existing entity to a 501c3 that I believe is being formed for this purpose. This is very convoluted. I understand it's required by the federal tax code for them to issue that bond, that where the facility is located, the local government has to approve after a public hearing. And so I'm tentatively scheduling that for July 19th and requiring the applicant in that matter, they're represented by attorneys from Philadelphia, to come before you to explain it. I understand there's no fiscal impact to the city. I've also recommended that they get representatives from Landmark Academy. So don't worry about it right now. I just wanted to let you know that was coming up on your schedule sometime next month, so you have that to look forward to. That was it for my report. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Does anybody on council have any questions for Mr. Sheasley? Councilmember Noble.
I would like to express my discomfort of having Mr. Sura represent us at the financial assurances rulemaking. I am concerned that he will not reflect what is included in our oil and gas regulations and would take a different path. What assurances can we have that he will do, he will meet the intentions of this city council in the financial assurances that were included in our oil and gas regulations?
Well, sure. I'm not aware of the source of your concern. However, I don't question that it's justifiably held. Mr. Sura has a professional obligation as an attorney to represent the city in accordance with our objectives as a city, and the city council as the governing body in accordance with your objectives of representation. That is his sworn duty as an officer of the court in the state of Colorado. He will be overseen by my office through me and Deputy City Attorney Hayter. He understands what our regulations are well and was critical in forming them, and has analyzed already the proposed rulemaking against what our current assurances are, and understands that as published and as proposed, they appear to be inadequate in light of our regulations. And there are substantial opportunities for municipalities to suggest stronger regulations, and I believe he would do so.
So there will be, in representing Brighton as well, that there would be no disagreement between our views.
Yes, if there's a conflict of interest in that, he would not be able to represent both parties and would have to engage separately, or would have to engage only one. We will monitor that to make sure that those statements are appropriate. If any written submissions, we can report back to council as part of the process. I believe that council would be interested in doing that as needed and as part of the oil and gas monthly update.
Thank you. And I would like to be like us to be made aware when the rulemaking takes place, in case any of us wishes to listen in.
Absolutely.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Sheasley? Seeing none, thank you for your report, sir, and for the update. Are there any council members wishing to make a report this evening? Councilmember Noble.
You know, I really apologize because I don't think I've ever quite gotten the handle of when it's administrative council business and when it's a council report. I did want to address, among other things, the 60th and Monaco issue that keeps coming back. I bet I could count on 2 hands or more how often we have heard about this, and to have it unresolved since those of us who just came on council, for it to still be unresolved is really discouraging. And somehow we need to have this addressed, because I feel so badly for the residents who live in that area in particular. And there must be something we can do, and I would hope we can do it. The speaker said that our police department doesn't have enough services, and we have offered to do more. So if it's up to the police department to let us know what it needs, and we will help make that happen. Secondly, I would like to take a minute to thank Jody Hardy and her team for providing us with daily COVID news updates for the past, 15 months, probably at a minimum. I know she's switching, the team is switching to once a week, but it's really been helpful. And I, for one, really appreciate it. There was some question about Suncor and a risk management plan. And I would like staff to provide us with the risk management plan for Suncor when we have the next oil and gas and Suncor report, which is the first Monday of the month. Well, it wouldn't be the first Monday, it would be the following Monday because of July and the holiday. So there was a question about whether we even have the risk management plan, whether the Adams County firefighters have the risk management plan, and so forth. Mr. Rogers appears to have an answer already.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you, council. Good evening. Definitely staff will be able to provide you, I would say, sections of that risk management plan. Just for a little bit more background, obviously, that risk management plan is developed outside of the review and the scope of just not us as a local municipality, but also the LEPC, the Local Emergency Planning Committee, which we are a party to. That is a requirement in which that is for certain sensitive and confidential material, which is submitted to EPA. EPA then provides a review and then submits what are publicly digestible portions of that risk management plan to the LPEC for review. So we can be able to get you the sections that have been released of the submission that was made in 2017. And just for additional background for the council and just for the general community, the next submission that is required to the EPA is due in 2022.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rogers.
You're welcome, ma'am.
Mm-hmm. I would like to move to the State Water Quality Control Commission, and again, thank the council for supporting our efforts to stop the rollback of the anti-degradation rule. That happens statewide, and it is not going to occur now. It has been delayed for at least a decade, and that would have allowed further degradation of Colorado waters, which were already challenged by pollution. The bad news is that the Water Quality Control Commission was unwilling to revisit the rollback of the anti-degradation rule for the South Platte and Clear Creek near both Molson Coors and Suncor. The argument is that polluters must make a compelling argument that worsening the conditions of a stretch of river is unavoidable in creating economic growth for a community. That is a pretty appalling argument when you're talking about the kind of releases that come from Suncor, and certainly since they're having trouble with the walls. I hope that we can continue to pursue this with the Water Quality Control Commission. And finally, I just want to acknowledge again Councilwoman Alan Thomas and her bill that was signed into law on Friday with Governor Polis that establishes a license plate for nurses. That was really quite an achievement for any of us as regular folks taking on that kind of project. And it's really awesome that that she was so dedicated to this and got it accomplished. So congratulations, Councilwoman Alan Thomas. I, for one, am really proud of your accomplishment. And I'm so glad that it happened right now in order to thank in so many ways all of the nurses who put their lives on the line for the last so many months with COVID and continue to do so in so many different cases. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilwoman Noble.
Are there any other council members wishing to make a report? Seeing none, will be brief. Would like to also congratulate Councilmember Alan Thomas on a job well done to get that license plate approved. That was a huge undertaking on your part, and just very proud to have you as part of our council and the fact that you were successful in getting that done. Would like to thank Councilmember Noble for testifying for the Water Quality Commission. That's great, and was just seeing that an article is now posted online about the rules not going forward. So I appreciate you stepping in there and doing that. I have no other report to give other than that, so we will adjourn. We'll see you next week for our study session, and have a good night. Have a good week.
Thanks.